Ну, враг у нас с вами общий.
You must give those of us who are more reasonable the chance to carry the day.
After the Bourne movies, Matt Damon and director Paul Greengrass were one of the most bankable teams in Hollywood. Bourne Supremacy was a massive hit, made over $300 million at the box office. So when they got back together for Green Zone, everyone assumed it would be another slam dunk. It wasn't. The movie didn't even make its budget back. Critics gave it a 53%, which for the Bourne team is basically a slap in the face. But here's what Green Zone was actually trying to do. Damon plays an army officer whose job is to find the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The ones our government swore were there. The whole reason we went to war. And by the end of the film, he figures out there are no weapons, never were. His own government made it up, and now they want to kill anyone who knows. The movie came out in 2010 when people were still processing what happened. And maybe that's why it failed. It was telling audiences that the whole war was built on a lie, and a lot of people weren't ready to sit in a theater and hear that. The ones who did see it called it thrilling, but most people stayed home. George Lucas spent years trying to get this movie made. Red Tails is about the Tuskegee Airmen, black pilots in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II who faced racism at every turn, during recruitment, during training, and even after they started flying combat missions over Italy. The characters in the film are fictional, but they're based on real men from the 332nd Fighter Group. Those guys eventually became heroes and received a Presidential Unit Citation for their service. Lucas pushed hard for this one, but when it finally came out, critics gave it a 41% on Rotten Tomatoes. Lukewarm at best. The cast alone makes it worth watching. Terrence Howard, Cuba Gooding Jr., these aren't small names, and the story they're telling, that's not a story Hollywood tells very often. The 41% doesn't reflect what the movie actually accomplishes. If you've seen Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor and thought there has to be a better version of this, there is. It came out all the way back in 1970. The real attack on Pearl Harbor lasted just under 2 hours. This film recreates the bombing in an incredible 45-minute sequence. It's still one of the most realistic depictions of the attack ever put on screen. Death, destruction, soldiers scrambling to survive and fight back, all of it plays out with a level of accuracy that Michael Bay never even attempted. Critics gave it a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. Some of the complaints were similar to what people said about Bay's movie, that it focuses on the attack itself rather than the human stories of the survivors. But the difference is that Tora actually earns its battle sequences. The action is intense in a way that feels true to what those soldiers experienced, not like a video game. The film received 5 Oscar nominations, and it's sitting at 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. Something doesn't add up there. Doug Liman wasn't really known for war movies when he made The Wall. He'd done The Bourne Identity, which is more about attacks on American soil than actual warfare. Then he made Edge of Tomorrow, which took war movie ideas and dropped them into a sci-fi setting. But The Wall is something completely different. It's a tiny film with basically 2 actors on screen for the whole runtime. A U.S. Army sniper and his spotter get sent to investigate reports of an enemy sniper near the end of the Iraq War. They end up pinned down behind a crumbling wall, trying to survive against a shooter they can't see. John Cena plays the sniper, and this was years before he figured out his lane in Hollywood. Aaron Taylor Johnson plays the spotter. Critics dinged the movie partly because of the casting, gave it just 65% on Rotten Tomatoes. But what the critics missed is that this is a war movie willing to go somewhere most won't. The ending is devastating. I know it's a bit of a spoiler, but it doesn't give you the comfortable resolution you're expecting, and that's exactly why it's worth watching. The reason Kingdom of Heaven has a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes is that the studio took this movie away from Ridley Scott and butchered it before release. Scott made a war epic about the Third Crusade, with Orlando Bloom playing a blacksmith who ends up defending Jerusalem against Sultan Saladin. The cast was stacked. Liam Neeson, Brendan Gleeson, Jeremy Irons. Even in the negative reviews of the theatrical cut, critics admitted the cast was excellent. The problem was everything else felt rushed, underdeveloped, like something was missing. Because something was missing. The studio had cut the film down significantly before putting it in theaters. When Ridley Scott finally released his director's cut on home video, critics suddenly changed their tune. The story made sense now. The characters had depth. All the scenes the studio had ripped out were back in, and the movie transformed from a confusing mess into an actual epic. So the 39% is real, but it's reviewing a version of the film that Ridley Scott never intended anyone to see. The director's cut is a completely different experience. It's the movie Scott actually made before the studio got their hands on it. Midway was doomed with critics before it even came out, and that's because of one name, Roland Emmerich. Emmerich is the disaster movie guy. He's the guy behind Independence Day, The Day After Tomorrow 2012, big dumb spectacles with explosions and destruction. So when he announced he was making a historical war film about the first 6 months of the Pacific Theater, critics were already sharpening their knives. The movie starts with the attack on Pearl Harbor and follows American forces as they enter the war, building toward the Battle of Midway. Critics gave it a 42% on Rotten Tomatoes and mostly went after the script, which is fair. The dialogue here is weak at best. But Emmerich's disaster movie instincts actually work here. The man knows how to shoot chaos and destruction, and when that skill gets applied to actual historical battles, the results are spectacular. The combat sequences are intense, the special effects put you inside the war, and it all feels overwhelming. The script isn't great either, but as a depiction of what those battles actually looked like, Midway delivers. Sometimes that's enough for a war movie to be worth watching, even if the critics don't agree. There were 4 brothers in Belarus during World War II named Bielski. When the Nazis occupied their country and started going after Jews, these brothers did something almost unbelievable. They ran into the forest and started taking in refugees. They built shelters, found food, and eventually had hundreds of people living out there. Then they started fighting back. Edward Zwick made a movie about them. He cast Daniel Craig and Liev Schreiber as 2 of the brothers and set the whole thing in these massive forests. Tried to show what it must have been like to survive out there while the Nazis hunted you. Critics gave it a 58% and said the script lacked depth. But the story itself is incredible. Hundreds of Jewish refugees hiding in the forests, building a community in secret, learning to fight back against the people trying to exterminate them. And the whole time you know this actually happened. These brothers actually existed. The people they saved were real. This one is set in Stalingrad, winter of 1942, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. And in the middle of it, 2 snipers are hunting each other. One of them was Vasily Zaitsev, a Soviet soldier who became a legend for how many Germans he killed. The Soviets turned him into a propaganda hero to boost morale. The Germans sent their best sniper school instructor to take him out. That's what Enemy at the Gates is built around. Jude Law as Zaitsev, Ed Harris as the German sent to kill him. Critics gave it a 53%, which is a bit too harsh. The sniper sequences are tense as hell, the performances are strong, and the film does something you almost never see in American movies. It treats Soviet soldiers as heroes. Movies about World War II almost always focus on American and British forces, so this one stands out just for taking a different perspective. Makes a somewhat ironic watch in 2026. Owen Wilson in a serious war movie. That sounds like a joke, but it's not. He plays a naval flight officer who gets shot down over Bosnia. Gene Hackman plays the admiral trying to get him rescued, and the whole thing is this action-packed survival story as Wilson tries to evade enemy forces on the ground. Critics absolutely hated it, 36% on Rotten Tomatoes. But the funny thing is, audiences didn't agree at all. The audience score is 62%, almost double the critics. The movie earned money at the box office, made enough to spawn 3 sequels, and people kept watching it for years after. Sometimes critics want every war movie to be Saving Private Ryan. Sometimes people just want something exciting that moves fast and doesn't try to make them feel guilty for 2 hours. Wilson's got this energy that keeps the movie from getting too heavy. Sam Mendes came into Jarhead on an incredible run. He'd just won an Oscar for American Beauty. Then he made Road to Perdition, which was gorgeous and should have won more than it did. The guy was at the top of his game. So when he decided to make a war movie, people expected something epic. What they got was a movie about waiting. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Anthony Swofford, a Marine during Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. But the movie isn't really about combat, it's about what happens when you train young men to kill and then send them to a desert where nothing happens. They wait, they get bored, they start losing their minds a little, and when they finally come home, they don't know what any of it was for. Critics gave it a 60%, which was a drop for Mendes. They wanted combat, they wanted drama. What they got was a movie about the futility of fighting in wars that never seem to end. That's not what most people want from a war movie, and it probably hurt the score. But Jarhead knew exactly what it wanted to say, and it said it.